Teisha Bader with Shalom TV's news update for Tuesday, March the 18th, 2014. One IDF soldier was seriously wounded and 3 other soldiers were lightly to moderately wounded today near Israel's border with Syria. The soldiers were traveling in an army jeep in the Golan Heights today near the Druze village of Majd al-Shams when a roadside bomb was detonated, injuring them. The soldiers were taken to Rambam Hospital in Haifa for treatment. The Times of Israel reports that the jeep was apparently hit after the Israeli soldiers spotted a suspicious person near the border fence with Syria and approached to investigate. Ma'ariv reported that the patrol was also shot at by gunfire. Israeli artillery units responded to the detonation by firing on Syrian targets identified by the IDF as being linked to those who planted and set off the explosive device. And the military reported that the artillery fire into Syria hit 2 sites in the nearby city of Quneitra, including a Syrian army base. Today's incident follows a similar one this past Friday when an IDF convoy was the target of an explosive device near the border with Lebanon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded to the latest attack today at the Israel-Syrian border at his Likud faction meeting, where he said that his government had successfully maintained quiet on that border despite Syria's civil war. The Prime Minister said recently the border with Syria has become filled with jihadists and Hezbollah men, which pose a new challenge for us to deal with. He said we managed to keep the peace in the Syrian border despite its ongoing civil war, but we will act firmly if needed to maintain Israel's security. During his meeting yesterday with U.S. President Barack Obama, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas reiterated that the Palestinians would not recognize Israel as a Jewish state. Abbas said Palestinian leadership had already recognized Israel, referring to former Palestinian Authority Chairman the late Yasser Arafat's recognition of Israel in 1993, and that was sufficient. Abbas said since 1988 and into 1993, we have been extending our hands to our Israeli neighbors so that we can reach a fair and lasting peace to this problem. Since 1988, we have recognized international legitimacy resolutions, and this was a very courageous step on the part of the Palestinian leadership. He said, and in 1993, we recognized the State of Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stressed that recognition of Israel as a Jewish state is critical to any peace agreement. Following Abbas's remarks on the subject at the White House, State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki addressed the recognition issue. She said, "We know that's an issue that the Israelis have spoken about, but we will let those issues remain discussed behind closed doors." Abbas also raised the issue of Palestinian refugees and the need for Israel to release additional security prisoners when he met with Obama. Abbas outlined his position for negotiations to the president as including, quote, working for a solution that is based on international legitimacy and also the borders, the 1967 borders, so that the Palestinians can have their own independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital, and so that we can find a fair and lasting solution to the refugee problem. Abbas did not include the option of land swaps as President Obama did. Obama had said yesterday that everyone knew what an outline for a peace deal would look like, and that it was based on 67 lines with mutually agreed upon swaps that would ensure that Israel was secure, but would also ensure that the Palestinians have a sovereign state. In spite of the tough issues that remain, President Obama said yesterday that there was still a chance for a peace deal. He said, "We remain convinced there is an opportunity for the peace process to succeed."
It's very hard. It's very challenging. We're going to have to take some tough political decisions and risks if we're able to move it forward.
The Times of Israel reports that the Palestinians might be open to discussing the issue of recognizing Israel as a Jewish state at the end of peace talks. Palestinian official Nabil Shaath, who sits on the Fatah Central Committee and is a former negotiator for the Palestinians, told Israel Radio that it was also the timing of Israel's demand for recognition that was bothering the Palestinians. He said was as if Israel was trying to sink the talks. Shaath said, had this come at the end after having resolved all these issues, it would have become an issue that we could settle by simply asking practical questions. And if we get the right answers, it could have been resolved then. But now, he said, it's very suspicious. He said the Palestinians would consider studying the issue of recognizing Israel as a Jewish state at the end of talks, and if their questions on the issue are answered correctly, they would think about it. Israeli Justice Minister and Chief Negotiator Tzipi Livni warned Palestinian Authority President Abbas that Israel may not carry out the final release of Palestinian prisoners if Abbas doesn't commit to extending peace talks with Israel past the upcoming April 29th deadline. Livni said today there was never any automatic commitment to release prisoners unrelated to making progress in negotiations. Israel had agreed to release 104 Palestinian security prisoners, most of whom were involved in deadly terror attacks against Israel, as a gesture for the restart of peace talks this past July, and has already freed more than 70 of them. Another Israeli official said today that Israel needed some assurance that peace talks would last beyond the prisoner release, which is set to take place at the end of this month. Jewish diplomat Daniel Rubenstein has been named as the next U.S. Special Envoy for Syria. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said yesterday that Rubenstein would replace Robert Ford, calling him a foremost expert on the Middle East. Rubenstein served as Consul General at the U.S. Consulate in Jerusalem from 2009 to 2012 and directed the state's Office of Israel and Palestinian Affairs from 2004 to 2005. The World Jewish Congress is urging Sweden to increase their security of Jewish institutions and sites in Stockholm after a recent incident of anti-Semitic vandalism in the city. Jewish high school Vasa Real was defaced with swastikas and anti-Jewish and Nazi graffiti in Swedish last week. WJC President Ronald Lauder said after the incident that with an upsurge in Sweden of violent and anti-Semitic behavior linked to political extremism, the authorities must step up protection around Jewish sites. Lauder also thanked Swedish authorities for close cooperation with the Jewish community and for their ongoing investigation of the incident. Lena Posner-Koroy, who is president of the Council of Swedish Jewish Communities, an affiliate of the WJC, said that the Swedish government had expressed concern and eagerness to act in response to the vandalism, and that parliamentarians and ministers were meeting on the issue with the head of the Swedish secret police. The Ruderman Family Foundation is accepting applications for its annual prize in inclusion. The $250,000 award recognizes organizations worldwide that have demonstrated their commitment to the full inclusion of people with disabilities into the Jewish community through innovative programs and services. It will be given to 5 organizations who split the winnings. President of the foundation, Jay Ruderman, said, "It is our hope that by shining a light on the leaders in inclusion in our community, that we will encourage other organizations to follow their lead and effectuate lasting change." He said, "We believe that a more inclusive Jewish community is a fair and flourishing one for all. Applications must be submitted by April the 7th. The winners will be announced this June." And turning to our Shalom TV programming for tonight, Tuesday, March the 18th, at 7:30, more coverage from the recent AIPAC National Policy Conference in Washington, D.C., with a panel discussion of Middle East analysis, with author and staff writer for The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, executive director of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, Robert Satloff, and one of Israel's leading media experts, Amos Harel. At 9 o'clock, Israeli journalist and author Yossi Klein Halevi joins Mark Golub on L'chaim to talk about his award-winning book, Like Dreamers. Then at 10 o'clock, director of Israel's Pardes Institute for Judaism and Conflict Resolution, Daniel Roth, talks about reviving the pursuit for peace at the recent Limmud conference. That's all coming up tonight here on Shalom TV and ShalomTV.com. And that's Shalom TV's news update for Tuesday, March the 18th, 2014. I'm Teisha Bader.